It began not with a monument, a skull or the bones of an extinct beast, but with something far more fragile, a sliver of wood buried beneath the mud of time. 200,000 years ago, a wooden spear slipped from the grasp of a hunter and vanished beneath a lake's still waters. For millennia it slept, preserved in silence until modern excavators pulled it from the earth and, unknowingly, cracked open one of the most profound mysteries of human evolution. Because that stick, dark, soaked, and perfectly balanced, was no accident. It was crafted by hands that belonged to a mind capable of thought, of planning, of perfection. It told a story that shattered everything we thought we knew about Neanderthals. They were not the brutish caricatures drawn by centuries of ignorance. They were engineers, hunters, and teachers, masters of wood and mind. What emerged from the mud of Schöningen was not just a tool, but a message carved in grain and patience, proof that even in the Ice Age, intelligence burned brightly. And with that discovery, history itself splintered, revealing that genius was never limited to our species alone. The discovery at Schöningen began like so many others, with mud, stone, and the patience of time. But what emerged from that ancient lakebed in northern Germany has reshaped our understanding of early human intelligence more profoundly than almost any fossil ever could. For centuries, wood had been the ghost material of archaeology, essential to survival yet rarely preserved, its absence painting a distorted picture of early human life. Where stone tools survived by the thousands, wood vanished into silence, leaving us to imagine what role it once played in shaping our ancestors' world. Then, from beneath layers of peat and sediment, researchers uncovered a cache of wooden artifacts, spear shafts, throwing sticks, and split wood tools, preserved so perfectly that even the marks of ancient craftsmanship could still be read in their grain. They were discovered at what had once been the shoreline of a Pleistocene lake, a place where herds of horses, bison, and deer came to drink, and where Neanderthals, or perhaps their close relatives, waited, weapons ready. The spears, measuring up to 2.5 meters long, were balanced and tapered at both ends, designed for throwing or thrusting with precision. Each one had been carved from carefully chosen spruce and pine, the makers understanding instinctively how to exploit the natural properties of the wood, its flexibility, grain, and strength. These were not the products of chance or crude experimentation. They were the result of practiced technique and shared knowledge passed down through generations. The crafting process revealed a sophisticated grasp of geometry, balance, and even aerodynamics. The pith of the tree had been deliberately offset from the spear's center to prevent breakage, and the shafts were smoothed and polished for grip and control. These choices reflected forethought and experience, qualities once thought exclusive to Homo sapiens. But the revelation didn't end with craftsmanship. Around the same layer where these spears were found lay the remains of dozens of horses, their bones marked by cut lines and fractures from butchery. This was no accident. It was a hunting scene frozen in time, evidence of coordination and planning on a scale once unimaginable for Neanderthals. The hunters had driven herds into the shallows of the lake, where escape was limited, and used the spears to deliver lethal blows before processing the carcasses on site. This was not scavenging, it was strategy. The combination of preserved weapons and animal remains told a story of intelligence expressed through cooperation. The Schöningen Neanderthals were organized, social, and adaptive. They communicated, coordinated, and understood both terrain and prey. Their tools were not random improvisations, but the culmination of observation, innovation, and community. They reveal a mind capable of abstraction, of envisioning the outcome before the action. But beyond the hunt, the site spoke of something even deeper, the birth of craftsmanship as culture. The variety of wooden implements discovered, digging sticks, hide-softening tools, and smaller carved fragments, hinted at a daily life in which wood was not secondary to stone, but its equal. For generations, archaeologists had dismissed Neanderthals as limited in creativity, bound to the simplicity of flint. Yet Schöningen proved that much of their world had simply vanished because of the perishable nature of their chosen medium. Wood was the unseen companion of stone, the quiet counterpart to fire, and its mastery demanded not brute force but patience, planning, and care. The makers of these tools understood material properties at a level that borders on modern craftsmanship. They selected trees not at random, but by species and season, likely knowing which would dry evenly and which would split cleanly along the grain. They removed bark and branches with precision, shaped symmetrical points, and maintained consistent diameters along entire shafts, all without metal tools or written guides. This wasn't instinctual tinkering. It was skilled labor honed through knowledge and apprenticeship. It required social learning, where younger members watched elders craft and repair, where memory and skill intertwined to create tradition. In these details lies one of the most profound implications of Schöningen, the presence of culture. True culture requires not just tool use, but the transmission of ideas. It means teaching, imitation, correction, and refinement, a living technology evolving within a community. These spears, with their symmetry and design, were cultural artifacts in every sense. They reflected not only survival, but also aesthetic judgment and identity. Each one was a product of shared understanding, of language perhaps, not words carved in stone, but lessons whispered through gesture and repetition. And when the hunt was over, when the fires burned low beside the lakeshore, the makers would have rested beside their tools, each spear an extension of self and skill, each smooth shaft a story of hands that learned and taught. The water that swallowed those weapons preserved not just wood but wisdom, a silent testament to minds as sharp as the points they shaped. For centuries, science dismissed the Neanderthals as evolutionary dead ends, incapable of abstract thought, art, or complex technology. Yet every flake of stone, every fragment of pigment, and every carved piece of wood we uncover pushes that notion further into the past. Schöningen stands as the turning point, the moment where myth gave way to evidence, and the forgotten hands of Neanderthals reached out across 200 millennia to remind us that intelligence was never our monopoly. It was their legacy too. The discovery at Schöningen revealed not only ancient weapons, but an entire forgotten industry of craftsmanship that forever changes how we see Neanderthals. Beneath layers of clay and time lay the proof that these early humans were not crude survivors, but skilled artisans of wood, masters of a material long vanished from prehistory. What archaeologists unearthed were not fragments of chance, but the remnants of a technology so refined it rivals anything known from much later human cultures. Among the finds were not only spears and throwing sticks, but a vast variety of worked wooden objects, digging tools, scraping implements, and smoothed shafts that spoke of deliberate design and experience. The secret of their creation lay in a method known as wood splitting, a practice that involves cleaving timber along its natural grain to produce strong, straight, and uniform pieces. For modern carpenters, this technique is second nature, but for people 200,000 years ago, it demonstrates remarkable understanding of material science. They knew how the wood would react to pressure, how the grain could guide the fracture, and how to predict the strength of each split. This was not trial and error. It was precision born from generations of observation and teaching. The Schöningen Neanderthals selected spruce, pine, and larch, not at random, but because these woods offered the perfect balance of flexibility, strength, and resilience. They stripped bark, shaped points, and even seasoned the timber before final carving, ensuring that their tools would endure through repeated use. Some of the artifacts show scraping marks from stone blades, the fine polish of repeated handling, and the faint symmetry that can only come from practiced hands. Such craftsmanship demands not only physical skill, but foresight, planning, and an ability to imagine the finished product before it exists, traits that speak of abstract thinking and cultural continuity. What's most revealing is that these methods were standardized, suggesting a shared system of knowledge, perhaps passed through demonstration and apprenticeship within family groups or hunting bands. This was not the work of individuals improvising in isolation, but of communities preserving and refining a body of technical wisdom. Every stick, every shaft, and every smoothed edge hints at a world where woodworking was not a rare skill but a daily necessity, a language of survival written in the grain of trees. And yet, the true magnitude of this mastery remained invisible for millennia, simply because wood rarely endures the passage of time. In dry caves and open plains it rotted away, leaving behind only stone as a misleading marker of intelligence. Schöningen changes that narrative entirely, showing us that the real technological frontier of the Paleolithic was not carved from flint, but shaped from living forest. Here Neanderthals were not brute hunters, but engineers who understood balance, aerodynamics, and efficiency. Their spears were straight, perfectly weighted, and double-pointed for both thrusting and throwing. Their shorter sticks carefully balanced for rotation through the air like early boomerangs. Even the discarded splinters were reused, reshaped, and reimagined into tools for scraping hides or digging roots. This recycling mindset reveals a culture that valued resources, minimized waste, and understood the cycles of use and renewal. Far from the caricature of ape-like savages, these people were deliberate creators who combined practicality with an almost aesthetic sense of proportion. The smoothness of a handle, the angle of a tip, the polish of a shaft, all reflected care, pride, and a deep relationship with the materials of their world. In every way, the evidence from Schöningen demonstrates that woodworking was not just a peripheral skill, but a defining aspect of Neanderthal life, a sign of minds capable of abstract reasoning, long-term planning, and the passing down of cultural memory through touch, repetition, and mastery. ChatGPT said, "The discoveries at Schöningen do more than illuminate the technical brilliance of Neanderthal woodworking. They redefine the very boundaries of what it means to be human." For generations, the Neanderthals were painted as an evolutionary dead end, creatures of brute strength and limited imagination who vanished before the dawn of modern intelligence. Yet the evidence buried in that ancient lakebed tells a story of a people whose hands, hearts, and minds were far more complex than history allowed. The spears and splitwood tools unearthed, they are not relics of survival alone. They are symbols of intention, cooperation, and creativity. Each one tells of planning that reached beyond the moment, of a society capable of envisioning the hunt before it began, of elders teaching the young not merely how to throw a spear, but how to select the right branch, how to feel the weight of balance, how to prepare and preserve what nature provided. The remains of hunted horses found beside those tools reveal scenes of strategy, entire groups working in harmony, driving prey toward water, surrounding them with coordinated purpose. These were not random acts of instinct, but organized undertakings requiring communication, leadership, and shared memory. Within this framework, we begin to see not savages but thinkers, not beasts but builders of culture. Their woodworking, hunting, and resourcefulness all point to an emotional and intellectual depth long denied to them by outdated science. These were people who understood their environment intimately, who could predict how a tree would split or how a spear would fly through the air, who repaired what broke, adapted what failed, and passed down what worked. The wooden weapons they crafted were extensions of themselves, carefully balanced, tested, and maintained with respect and repetition. Over time, these tools became part of a collective identity, a tangible link between generations who lived and died beneath the same forests, hunted on the same plains, and told stories by the same fires. The Schöningen site captures not a moment of survival, but a glimpse of legacy, the persistence of knowledge, the shaping of wisdom, the rhythm of human life long before written words or recorded memory. And when modern researchers hold those ancient spears, they are not simply holding wood, they are holding thought itself, preserved through time in the silent geometry of craftsmanship. It is a reminder that intelligence does not always leave monuments of stone or metal. Sometimes it lingers in the delicate balance of a spear tip, in the polish of a handle, or in the grain of a branch that once felt the press of a thoughtful thumb. What Schöningen ultimately proves is that humanity's story is far older, deeper, and more intertwined than we ever imagined. The line that once divided Neanderthal from Homo sapiens begins to blur, replaced by a continuum of creativity and cognition stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. The same hands that shaped those spears are not so different from ours. They measured, experimented, and dreamed within their world, just as we do within ours. When we strip away the prejudice of bones and categories, what remains is a shared legacy of innovation. The Neanderthals of Schöningen were not failed experiments in evolution. They were pioneers of an art that predated civilization itself. Their legacy, hidden in mud and silence, survived to remind us that intelligence is not a recent gift, but an ancient inheritance, one written not only in the fossil record, but in the forgotten wood that once bore the weight of their hopes, their skills, and their story.